Hello, I'm Aaron. I'm a solo musician who live streams performances from gigs, from home, or just wherever. I'd like to share how I mix my audio for anyone who's curious, interested in maybe how to tweak their audio for live streams. But first, I'd like to give a disclaimer because, first of all, I'm by no means an audio expert. This video is merely a walkthrough of just how I do audio for live streams right now. And it's not the same way I did it 3 to 5 years ago, and 3 to 5 years from now, I may be doing it differently. It's just a snapshot of what I do and my philosophy on how I approach the audio. When it comes to music and mixing, it's a science. And it's an art. So it's a science in the effect that the biggest bands of all time, they go to the most sophisticated recording studios to get state-of-the-art equipment to get that perfect sound that they want. But it's also an art. So that's why you have those same bands will record songs where they put their amp in the stairwell or a granary silo or something like that. So they're best practices, but there's no means like a real Bible on how to do things. You can do things wrong, quote unquote wrong, to achieve a certain sound you're wanting to get. There's really not one way to do things. So that's why I want to focus a little bit more on philosophy than just technical stuff. Whew. I really dislike making videos. My current setup for live looping is I loop off of my computer, so I have to use an audio interface, but I will, I sing. I play my guitar through a Line 6 HD 500X right now, and go into the program. I'll use the program to use a MIDI keyboard to play drums, play piano, synths, anything like that. I'm basically the typical one-man band thing, so I'm building drums, bass, rhythm guitar, synth, lead vocals, lead guitar. So my philosophical approach is I'm wanting my lead vocals here and my lead guitar to stand out in front of the rest of the mix. So when I'm mixing my songs, my vocals and my lead guitar is going to be a little bit louder than the rest of the instrumentation of the track. So I have to purposely mix it that way. Now, for those of you who are live looping on like a hardware pedal, a lot of times when you're building your loops, that pedal's automatically putting like the backing instrumentation, your drums and things like that. It's already kind of putting it down a little bit lower in the mix, and your live guitar or live piano or whatever and your singing's already sitting on top. I'm wanting to feature vocals and guitar over everything else. And that really doesn't stop at the volume level. You're going to see that recurring through every step of how I mix. So with all my levels set and me wanting to prioritize vocals and lead guitar over everything else, that's the first step. That's kind of your volume. So the next thing that I intentionally try to improve upon is the spacing. So the positioning of the instrumentation. So I stream in stereo, and that may seem like a no-brainer. For me, that goes deeper than just sending a stereo signal to YouTube. I have to look at what am I doing with that stereo signal? Just because I have it, am I really utilizing it to its full potential? If you're running a stereo signal, but you have all your instruments dead center, where they're all equally coming out of the left speaker and equally coming out of the right speaker, it's a jumbled mess. It's unnatural. Even when you go to a coffee shop and there's a solo musician just playing an acoustic guitar, not doing anything fancy, they're not mono. Sitting in a room at a coffee shop, you're hearing echoes bouncing off tables, off walls. There is a 3D space happening with that sound. So with stereo signal, I'm wanting to really take advantage of that. So even if you don't have ways of panning your instrumentation, even if your guitar is dead center and you're using a stereo delay, the delay is going to bounce kind of between the left and right speaker, and that's going to help out. If you're using a a drum set VST, or a hand sonic or something like that. That's in stereo. If you can pan some of the toms or congas or something like that, so they're coming out differently in the mix through between the left and the right speaker, and that'll actually help do a stereo imaging. But how I like to mix my or do my panning really is something similar to this. This is kind of what my mix looks like. So now, as you can see, my vocals and my lead guitar there is, louder. So I have them bigger just for that representation. But it's not just loudness, it's also the positioning. So the lead vocals is usually the only thing in my mix that is just dead center. My vocals are coming out equally in the left and the right speaker. My lead guitar, I generally have just panned just a little bit off to the side. And my panning isn't this extreme. I just have it kind of like this for a visual representation. Also, my bass guitar, my piano, I'll have panned off a little bit to the other direction. There's actually multiple reasons for this. One is if someone's going to put on headphones, they're going to hear the vocals clearly. If they're just listening on their phone, they're going to hear the vocals clearly. But with the headphones, I can hear the vocals, but then when I'm playing the lead guitar here, it has its own little position they can use their brain to just kind of hone into because it's just sitting there. Or if the piano and the guitar or the bass and the lead are just playing off each other, they're going to be playing off each other in a different positioning in the headphones. So I really do my best to position my audio in its own space. That may be harder to do with a traditional like hardware loop pedal. I'm not too sure, but just stereo delays will help. Even if you use like a particular patch for a bass guitar, if you just pan the bass guitar a little bit off from your lead, that'll help. So every little thing helps. It doesn't have to be anything extreme. You don't have to do something extreme like the Beatles. The Beatles on some of their songs, they'll just have the drums only coming out of the left speaker and the vocals only coming out of the right speaker. You can go crazy if you want to and do something like that. But my approach is a bunch of small changes and small tweaks to the mix accumulate over the mix and just impact the sound in a better way. It's better to kind of approach it in small steps than just going crazy. So unless you just want to go crazy and do real drastic things, all right? There's not a right way or wrong way. You also might notice I have two drum set icons here, and that's just currently how I'm doing drums now. I've never been happy with any drum sample I've used. Every single one has a pro and a con. So currently what I'm doing right now when I'm playing songs, I don't know if anybody's noticed, but I'll generally have like an acoustic drum set, and then I'll also do an 808 drum machine at the same time. And so they both kind of, they both have their pros and cons, but when I throw them both into a song, I'm generally happier with the song. I don't know what it is. Maybe I just like the contrast between synthetic and acoustic, but that's why there's two drums there. But I'll have those panned differently. So you'll generally hear, the 808 in one ear more and then you'll hear the acoustic drum set a little more in the other ear. Just looking at the mix in itself, I'm very intentional about the stereo panning. It's more than just sending a signal. What are you doing with the stereo? It's there, so utilize it. And those are actually probably the two easiest to explain of what I do. There's an additional benefit to panning your instrumentation as a musician if you are using in-ear monitors. And this is from personal experience. So if all the instrumentation is dead center, I end up cranking up the volume in my ears just so I can hear everything a little bit better. Obviously, that's not good long-term for hearing. But I found that when you do a pan mix, I don't have to turn my volume up as loud, and I can really focus on the guitar or focus on my singing. Piano and drums, once they're good, they're kind of mixed off to the side, and it's just background. And so I can just really zone in on other things. And like if you're using a click track, you may find You may find hard panning a click track just in one ear helps you hear it better. I have mine just a little off to the side. I don't like to have it dead center. That's just an added benefit of stereo panning. All right, so that's the first two phases of how I'm approaching my mix. First the volume levels, and secondly the stereo positioning of the music. The next phase is going to take the longest. So this next phase, so we did volume, we did positioning. Next is going to be, how am I going to call this? Having each instrument sitting in its own space sonically, not in panning, but in frequency. This is an area where I've had my two biggest quote-unquote breakthroughs on improving my sound. So this is why I'm going to spend a little more time explaining this. I think by nature it takes a little bit more. It will take more to explain why. This is where I improved my sound the most. And so I'm going to spend more time on it in case anyone else is wrestling with this. With that said, so naturally instruments have their own frequency range where they're most pronounced, where they perform. And because of that, they're going to overlap with each other at some point. When they overlap, you have like the bass guitar and the drums, they tend to compete with each other sometimes. They're fighting for some of the lower frequencies. What happens is that's called frequency masking. And so you have two or more instruments fighting for the same frequency. The sound becomes muddy. It's just not clear. You really can't hear the instrumentation as well. It's more pronounced in lower frequencies than higher frequencies. Bass guitar, notorious for bumping up against the bass drum. The synth, depending what you're doing, like the lower ends of a piano or a low synth will clash with the bass guitar, or even within the mid-range can clash with the guitar. Even vocals can kind of get in the way of the guitar as well. So if you're not cognizant of what's going on with your EQ, it's human nature to sit down and listen to a mix and be like, oh man, the bass drum isn't coming through, or the bass guitar isn't coming through. So let's go to the EQ and turn up the low. Let's boost the lows. And you'll be like, oh, the vocals isn't as clear as it needs to be, so let's turn up the highs. That's just human nature, just to boost frequencies. And what happens with that, you're actually more often than not making the problem worse. So you're going from this problem, you're going from this problem here where it's some of the frequencies of the instrumentation is overlapping, to you're boosting frequencies on the EQ, and now you're making the problem worse. If there's one thing about EQ that you take away from this video, is this one thing here. How I approach it is 9 times out of 10, I'm going to cut a frequency before I boost a frequency. So going back, just playing live, this is just what it sounds like when you just play naturally. You have the overlap. Going back to my philosophy, I'm always going to focus on prioritizing lead vocals and lead guitar over everything else. So I almost never EQ my drums, bass guitar, or electric guitar. I keep those in their natural state as much as possible because I just like how it sounds in the mix. So when it comes time for EQing, I will generally cut frequencies on my synths and my vocals. Actually, I'll cut out some of the frequencies there. My guitar with the Line 6, I'm using amp modeling, and a lot of times the amp modeling it's bringing its own EQ into the equation, and generally that will take out some of the low end where it's not really competing with the bass guitar as much. A lot of that cutting the low end on my vocals is I'll get right up on a microphone when I sing. And that's a thing called proximity effect. So if you're further away from the mic, your voice is thinner, but the closer you get to the microphone, it just adds some bass to it, adds some roundness. And since I tend to sing that way, I'll cut a little bit of that out of the EQ. And we're going to go through some sound examples here shortly. Basically, cutting the EQ is going from this problem here we have in the overlap to something a little bit more like this. So each instrument is really sitting in its own frequency range and performing in its own frequency range and not clashing with another instrument, so everything's just clearer. So yeah, so you just want to go from this to this, right? You don't want to go from this to that, right? You want every instrument sitting in its own little space. Let's listen to some examples. So you're going to need some headphones for this. Okay, here we are in my DAW, or my live looping software. This is what I look at when I'm playing live. I will do a video on this some other time. So what I have pulled up here is the last time I played New Year's Day by U2, and I want to go over EQ. So this is going to be really good with headphones, right? So this is piano. I'm going to take away, this is just piano in the normal state. I turned off all the effects. I got it soloed. And just as a disclaimer, there's going to be a lot of repeating or repetitive stuff here, so I hope it doesn't drive you crazy, but just listen to the piano. You can hear the low end. It's basically, you know, the bum, bum, bum. That's what I want you to focus on. Just listen. That low end is going to compete with the bass guitar. But it's not really competing that much, but still I want to carve it out. So I'm going to just listen. I'm going to EQ. I'm going to turn the EQ on so you can hear the low end being cut out. So it sounds thinner, right? And by itself it doesn't sound that great, but when it comes back with the bass guitar, it sits nicely. It sits better in the mix. So I'm just going to turn it off and on. Very subtle. But all this stuff adds up. Let's add the reverb and delay. So yeah, so that's an example of EQing. I cut some of the low end of the piano so it sits in its own little space. Those low notes, you can still hear the bum, bum, bum. But as far as the low end and the low frequencies, the bass guitar is going to be carrying the song. You're not going to have that bass guitar fighting the low end of the piano. But you can still hear both now. So let's move to another example here. All right, here's another song, Magic Carpet Ride. This one, yeah. So this one here, let's just start here. Usually at this point of the song, I'm kind of doing like a low end synth. Let's just focus on this. So this is the EQ profile. I've cut a lot of the low end, and so this is a low synth. I'm playing really low notes. So that synth sounds really good with no EQ, just by itself. It's got this nice fat end, you know, is just nice and solid. But I don't want it competing with the bass guitar and the drums. So I cut the low end. It gets thinner, but when it's with the rest of the instrumentation, it just still sounds great. And then there's another keyboard synth sound here. So let's turn off the EQ to see how fat that is on its own. So yeah, that's another example of why, you know, where I will cut EQ. Let's do vocals next. This is a 1979 by Smashing Pumpkins, and I'm going to focus on how I EQ my vocals. And so let me pull up. This is my EQ profile here. As you can see, I'm turning down some of that low end, and a lot of that is because I sing right up on the mic, and so it just adds more bass to my voice. And you can see here I boost a little bit of the high end, so the S's are a little more clear. But the cuts on the low end is more dramatic than the boost on the high end. So let's listen to the vocals by itself. No EQ, no effects, no delay.
Justine never knew the rules.
It's kind of funny. You can hear people talking in the background.
Justine never knew the rules.
You hear that, just the bass and the vocals. Let's just add in the rest of the instrumentation.
Justine never knew the rules. Justine never knew the rules.
So, you know, as I said earlier, I want to prioritize my vocals, and cutting that low end actually makes the voice sound louder. Because it's not competing with the guitars anymore. It's the guitar is going to do its own thing, then my voice is going to do its own thing. Just listen. I'm going to turn on the EQing here. Let's listen.
Justine never knew the rules. Justine never knew the rules. Justine never knew the rules. Justine never knew the rules.
So it's very subtle, but it makes a difference, and subtle changes add up. So you're doing that I'm doing that to the synths, I'm doing that to my vocals, positioning, EQing, then things just start to sound clear. So that was phase one of there's a phase two of this, and the phase two is if you're using delays or you're using reverbs, you want to have those filtered.
Justine never knew the rules.
And turn on the delay.
Justine never knew the rules.
So the thing about delays and reverbs is, since they repeat, if you repeat the full spectrum of those frequencies while you're singing, if you're using delay in your voice, or while you're playing on an instrument, you're going to have that frequency clash again. All of a sudden your guitar and your vocal is not competing with another instrument, it's competing with itself now. So I'm going to do this delay with the filtering. So this is the filtering here, right? If you can see this knob being turned. As I turn that up, it cuts some of the lower frequencies. So this is just the pure delay by itself if I just slap the delay on.
Justine never knew the rules.
Just pay attention to the echoes and how it's the same low end.
Justine never knew the rules. Justine never knew the rules.
Now I'm going to cut those low frequencies only on the echoes.
Justine never knew the rules. Justine never knew the rules.
Now with full delay, no cut.
Justine never knew the rules. Justine never knew the rules.
So when you filter your delays and filter your reverbs to kind of take the low end off, then the vocals, whatever you're putting that on, is going to sound clearer because it's not competing with itself now. So you're actually eliminating two problems. So this was like the last thing I've done to my mix that really improved things. And the clashing doesn't happen too often. But when it was happening, I didn't know what was happening. I just knew I didn't like what I was hearing, and it was driving me crazy. So let's listen to another example here. All right, so this is the delay that's filtered. I'm going to turn the filtering off. So this is going to be a good example because this is a delay on a very low note. These are low notes I'm playing, so they really clash. I mean, it sounds great by itself. If I was doing like a techno song with like a beat and just doing this or something, you know, this would be great. But since there's guitar and singing and everything else, you need to cut this low end. So that way you can hear the, you can still hear the echoes, and they're part of the music, but they're not causing problems. They're just there as a detail sitting in the background. They're not coming up to the front, so to speak. For the final example here, this is an original, so I'm going to play a little bit more of the song. I'm still going to loop a phrase, but I'm going to play it once where it's mixed, it's panned, EQ'd, filtered, and then I'll alternate that between where everything, all the instrumentations are dead center, no EQ, no compression, no filtering, and compare just the difference between the two.
Last night I took some backwards in my head. I was delighted to find. I was delighted to find. Yeah. Last night I took some backwards in my head. I was delighted to find. I was delighted to find. Yeah. Last night I took some backwards in my head.
That's pretty much it. Just in a nutshell of how I do my mix. Now, I realized I just briefly a few moments ago mentioned compression, and I totally skipped over that. And I'll just show you real fast what I do. I don't want to dive into compression because I don't fully understand it, and I know I will steer you people wrong. Here's some compression VSTs that I use. I use this, whatever this is called, mastering compressor. I use this on my vocals. These are my settings for it. It's kind of all over the place. I'm just showing it to you, just because. Then I'll use this compression plugin for my instrumentation. This one here is for guitar. I use a negative. I don't know what that means. That's my input, my output levels for it. On bass and drums, it's pretty much the same input and output, but I use deep. I don't know what they do. All I know is when I use deep, the bass drum pedal and the bass guitar really they come through the mix more. They thump. And with this, I just use that on the guitar. I don't like using deep. It makes the guitar sound too weird. So I can't explain these settings. I just know I like what I like. So that's what I use. And but I did want to touch on compression specifically for drums and bass. There's when I mentioned, you panning your instruments, having it in its own little area, then EQing it so it's not interfering with something else. The compression on drums and bass, getting that thump sound is very vital too. It really does. It really does help. I guess that's pretty much it. I don't have anything else to add really. And if you have questions, I really don't feel qualified to answer. You can ask in the comments, but I don't know if you should trust my answers. And if I don't answer, I really don't know. So anyway, hopefully this was insightful. Even better if it was beneficial. And so that's just how I do my music. And I'm doing some tweaks to my setup. So I'll do some videos here in the upcoming weeks. I'll do a rig rundown again. And I will also do another video on just the software that I use on how to loop and how that all works. So anyway, thanks for checking this video out, and I will see y'all hopefully in a live stream soon. Take care.